Bertha pressed her dead husband's ring between her palms and whispered, "I have no family left." Nate Hayes moved aside so she could reach the porch steps, offered a faint, steady smile, and said, "My children need a mother." Before Bertha could decide whether it was mercy or marriage, 9-year-old Percival pointed beyond the cottonwoods. "Pa, those are the men who burned Winnie's barn." 3 riders waited in the last light, too still to be travelers. None wore a badge. The lead horse carried a jagged brand Bertha had seen cut into the blackened gatepost at the Ramsey place. Beside her, Nate's smile disappeared. He had been sitting close enough that the sleeve of his canvas duster brushed her morning dress. Now he rose without haste and placed himself half a step nearer the yard, not in front of her, but close enough that the riders would have to reckon with him first. Inside, he told the children. 7-year-old Winnie clutched Percival's sleeve. Neither moved. Bertha's carpetbag stood by her boots, buckled and ready. 4 days earlier, she had stepped from the stagecoach with a letter appointing her teacher at the district school. She had found the schoolhouse bordered the road empty, and every family in the valley too frightened to send a child. Nate had given her the spare room until the next coach. That room had never felt like hers. The bag remained beneath the cot, packed for leaving. The rider on the roan spat into the dust. His gaze traveled from Nate to Bertha and settled there long enough to make her skin tighten. Nate's right hand stayed open at his side, inches from the colt on his belt. "Take Winnie," he said quietly. Bertha reached behind her, found the child's shoulder, and drew her close. "I am staying here." The words surprised her as much as they did him. The riders did not approach. The leader tipped 2 fingers to his hat, then wheeled away. The others followed. Dust swallowed them at the cottonwoods. Only after they vanished did Bertha realize she was still crushing the ring between her palms. Nate looked at her hand. "You've marked yourself." She opened her fingers. The ring's edge had left a red crescent in her skin. "It will fade," she said. His gaze lifted to her face. "Some marks do." There was no soft answer. Winnie had lost her parents in a fire. Percival's father had vanished after refusing the false deputies. Bertha's husband had been buried 18 months, her brother missing 6 weeks, and every house since had found a use for her before it found a place. She picked up the carpetbag. Nate stepped farther from the door, leaving the way clear. "The eastbound coach comes Tuesday. I won't hold you to what I said. You offered room and board through winter in exchange for schooling the children." She made her voice as neat as handwriting. "I accept those terms. I said they needed a mother. They need a teacher." She lifted her chin. "And I need wages. Let us not make sentiment out of necessity, Mr. Hayes." Something moved in his expression. Hurt, perhaps, or humor. Too tired to rise, he only nodded. Bertha carried the bag inside. The next morning, Nate found a paper nailed to the corral gate. He brought it to the kitchen while bacon snapped in the skillet and the children argued over the last clean slate. 6 head of cattle by Sunday sundown, the notice demanded. Beneath the crude signature, "Deputy," someone had added a line in charcoal. "Saw the Nash woman. Hand her over for questioning or the grass burns." Bertha set down the fork. For one foolish instant, the room seemed to narrow around the paper. "My brother Thomas wrote before he vanished," she said. "He said a homesteader named Elias Emery had hidden him for 2 nights after he took something from those men. Thomas told me to come to Kansas and find Mr. Emery. When I reached his claim, the cabin was empty." Nate's gaze shifted toward the yard where Percival was struggling with a water bucket. Elias Emery was the boy's father. Bertha looked through the window at Percival. The name had been in Thomas's letter, but until that moment, it had been only a name. The last line said, "If I cannot meet you, trust Elias," she whispered. Then the letter ended. Nate read the thread again. "They believe Thomas left a list with you. I have nothing of his." She touched the ring before she could stop herself. "Only this. Thomas carried it after our father died, then gave it to my husband on our wedding day." Percival came in from the yard, mud to his ankles. The roan kicked the rail loose. Nate folded the threat once very carefully. "Wash before breakfast." The boy obeyed without complaint. That frightened Bertha more than tears would have. When the children had gone to feed the hens, Nate placed both hands on the table. "The coach won't pass before Tuesday. On horseback, they would see you for 10 miles. If I remain, they will burn your house." "They may try." "You say that as if weather were coming." "I know what to do with weather. And men." His jaw tightened. "Some men are weather with a choice." He went to the window, watched the yard, then faced her. A hired teacher can be dragged away and called a vagrant. A woman, publicly betrothed to the owner of this place, is harder to touch without making enemies. Bertha stared at him. "A false betrothal? A public one? No wedding date, no claim on you. You keep your room, your wages, and your name. And when winter ends, you decide again." His proposal on the porch had sounded like a place prepared for any woman willing to fill it. This was different. He was building a wall and leaving a gate in it. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. Nate's eyes held hers. "What do you want to do?" The question unsettled her. Everyone else had told her what prudence required, what widowhood allowed, what work she ought to accept. No one had asked what she wanted since before sickness took her husband. She looked through the window. Winnie was crouched beside a hen, whispering to it. Percival repaired the rail with a hammer almost too heavy for him. "I want to open that schoolhouse," Bertha said. "And I want those men to learn they cannot empty this valley one frightened family at a time." A faint line appeared beside Nate's mouth. "Then we begin with the betrothal." The announcement was made that afternoon at Miller's store, before ranch hands' wives, the post rider, and old Mr. Coyle, who spread news faster than a telegraph wire. Nate stood beside Bertha at the counter. He did not touch her until Mr. Coyle leaned too close and asked whether she had trapped him with tears. Then Nate laid one broad hand over hers. "No," he said. "I asked." She considered. "That is the order of it." Bertha felt the warmth of his palm through her glove. He removed it as soon as Coyle backed away. The touch lasted 3 seconds. Its restraint followed her home. The false betrothal gave Bertha authority in the house, and she used it with a vigor that alarmed all 3 residents. She set school hours at the kitchen table. She required hands to be washed before lessons and boots left by the door. Percival learned that a boy could not escape fractions merely because a calf had found a weak fence. Winnie discovered that tears softened Bertha's voice, but did not shorten spelling. Nate discovered he had joined the class. One evening, after moving cattle from the north pasture, he lowered himself into a chair with the care of a man whose bones had turned against him. Bertha slid a slate in front of him. "You counted 10 pounds of flour twice." He stared at the figures. "I was hoping the Lord might multiply it." "The Lord has seen your biscuits. He wants no part of them." Percival coughed into his cup to hide a laugh. Nate looked wounded. "My biscuits have kept 2 children alive." "Out of fear," Bertha said. "They know if they die, you may serve them again in heaven." Winnie giggled so hard she hiccuped. Nate's laugh came a moment later, deep and rusty, as though it had been stored too long. The sound changed the cabin. For one breath, It did not feel like a shelter built around 4 separate losses. It felt like a home surprised by joy. That frightened Bertha, too. At supper, she gave Percival the thickest slice of beef and tipped the most broth into Winnie's bowl. She kept the smallest piece for herself. Nate noticed. He always noticed more than he said. The following night, he cut his own meat in half and set one portion on Bertha's plate before she sat down. "I can feed myself," she said. "I've seen how." "That is not an answer. No, ma'am." He did it again the next evening. On the third, she divided an apple into 4 equal pieces and placed the largest beside his spoon. Nate studied it. "Your arithmetic has turned generous. Eat before I correct it." His smile was brief, but it stayed in her mind after the lamp went out. He never asked about her husband. He did not treat grief as a locked box he had the right to open. Yet when Winnie woke screaming from a dream of fire, Bertha found Nate already beside the child's bed, holding out a cup of water and looking helpless before a terror he could not mend with rope or nails. Bertha sat on the mattress and rubbed slow circles between Winnie's shoulders. "You needn't be brave before breakfast," she whispered. Winnie clung to her sleeve until the shaking passed. At the door, Nate lowered his head. The next morning, he repaired the loose shutter outside Winnie's room, though it had not caused the nightmare. It was simply the hurt he could reach. Later that week, Percival split his knee on a fence rail. Nate began, "Shake it, Bertha," caught his sleeve. The words died. She gave Percival a wet cloth and waited while he wiped the scrape himself. "Does it still feel like the end of the world?" The boy sniffed. "Only the end of my leg." Nate crouched beside him. "That would save on boots." Percival glared, then laughed despite himself. Bertha released Nate's sleeve. He looked down at the place where her fingers had been, and she withdrew her hand too quickly. As October sharpened, Bertha wrote invitations to every family in the valley. She asked them to bring their children to the Hayes homestead on Sunday. If the district schoolhouse could not open safely, she would teach beneath the barn roof or in the yard. Percival carried the letters on the mule. The mule returned twice without him. On the third attempt, Bertha walked to the gate, placed a palm against the animal's neck, and said, "You may either carry the boy or explain yourself in complete sentences." The mule stepped forward. Nate stood holding the slack lead rope. "Women and livestock are forming a union against me. Only the sensible creatures." He watched her guide the mule down the road. The look on his face was not amusement alone. It carried the unease of a man seeing his quiet life make room for someone before he had granted it permission. The cattle drive to the railhead was due to leave the following Tuesday. 3 weeks on the trail would buy flour, lamp oil, and winter feed. Nate had expected to ride with it. Instead, on Thursday evening, he sat at the table cleaning his Winchester and said, "I told the trail boss to take another man." Bertha lowered the dress she was mending. "Why? Sunday is the school opening. That does not require you to lose 3 weeks' pay. If families arrive and find the man of this house gone, they will decide I offered you a room, but not my name. This is not truly your name." His hand stopped on the rifle barrel. "It is where their courage is concerned." She had no answer ready. He resumed cleaning the weapon. "Besides, Percival says I cannot be trusted to pack food for 3 weeks. From the hearth, Percival said, "You packed 1 onion and 6 biscuits last time." The onion was large. Bertha smiled, but pain moved beneath it. Nate was giving up money he needed not to confine her to his household, but to stand behind work that belonged to her. No man had ever made his life larger for her ambition. Her husband had thought teaching suitable only until marriage gave her other duties. Even Thomas's last letter had summoned her without asking whether she wanted a frontier life. Nate asked where she wanted him, then went there. The next afternoon he led Bertha and the children to a shallow draw west of the house. The sky had the pale hardness that came before early snow. "If the wind turns white," he told her, "do not run for the house unless you can see it. Find low ground. Tie the rope around all of you." He tossed her a coil of hemp. "Bowlin," he said. Bertha worked the stiff rope with cold fingers. The first knot slipped. Nate did not take it from her. He showed the turn once, then waited. Her second knot held. He pulled hard enough to test it. Again. She tied it faster. Good. The praise was small. It warmed her more than it should have. Winnie tried next and produced something resembling a strangled nest. Percival claimed it would hold a buffalo. Nate said it might hold the buffalo's opinion. By the time they walked home, all four were laughing into the wind. That night, Bertha opened the spare room door and found Nate paused in the hall. His eyes had gone to the carpetbag beneath her cot. "You still sleep as though Tuesday's coach is coming for you," he said. "It is habit. It is an escape." The quiet truth of it struck harder than accusation. Bertha set down the stack of readers in her arms. "When you told me your children needed a mother, you made my place plain. I was a function, a useful woman for a house missing one. Useful things are kept until they break, or until a better one comes along." Nate took one step into the room, then stopped when she stiffened. His hands remained open. "I was wrong. About needing help. About what I said." She waited. He glanced toward the hall where the children's voices drifted from the kitchen. "They need care. They need schooling. They need someone who does not shame them for hurting. But I use them as cover." "For what?" His throat worked before he answered. "For wanting you to stay." Bertha could not move. Nate looked directly at her, without the children, danger, or duty between them. Saying they needed you sounded practical. Saying I did felt like handing you a weapon. Her eyes burned. "You barely know me." "I know you give away your supper and pretend the plate was light. I know you threaten mules with grammar. I know you will cross a room to stop a child from being ashamed. I know my house sounds different when you are in it, and I listen for your step before I open the door." The rawness in his voice made the room feel smaller. Bertha pressed her fingers to the ring. "If I unpack that bag and they burn this place, if I let myself belong and it is taken, then I have lost another home. Keeping it packed makes leaving feel like my choice." Nate nodded once, as if she had given him a rule he meant to honor. "I cannot promise fire will never reach us." "No. But I can promise I will not lock a door to keep you. Stay because you choose it. Leave because you choose it. Not because I have named a use for you." He backed into the hall before she could answer. Bertha stood alone with the bag beneath the cot, and the terrible knowledge that he had asked for her without trying to own the answer. The fire came on Saturday. Winnie's scream brought Bertha from the kitchen. She reached the porch as 3 riders swept into the yard. The leader carried a pitch-soaked torch. He flung it into the dry grass beside the boarded schoolhouse down the road. Flame climbed at once. "The Nash woman! Bring her out, Hayes! We know she has the list." Nate stepped off the porch. His Colt was in his hand, now held low along his thigh. "She is not mine to hand over." "Then we burn the school. After that, the barn. Maybe we take one of those strays you call children." The insult changed Nate. He raised the Colt, not at the man's heart, but squarely at the torch still burning near the rider's boot. "You may threaten my cattle. You may threaten me. Speak of those children again and you will learn exactly how much temper I have spent years burying." The yard went silent. Bertha saw the lead rider's hand drift toward his gun. Nate's thumb eased back the hammer. Then she saw Winnie in the doorway, and Percival beside her, both frozen beneath the shadow of the same violence that had taken their families. "I know where the list is," Bertha called. Nate did not turn, but the barrel of his Colt lowered a fraction, giving her the space she had claimed. The riders looked at her. "My brother did not give it to me. He hid it. If you burn this place, I will send its location to the U.S. Marshal before nightfall." The leader sneered. "You are lying, widow." "Then test me." Her knees trembled beneath her skirt. She kept her voice level. The man studied her, then Nate, then the children watching from the doorway. He wanted fear, not a fight that might leave witnesses on both sides. 12 head. We take them now." Nate's jaw flexed. 12 steers meant winter feed repairs, perhaps the house itself. Yet he lowered the hammer beneath his thumb. "Take the cattle. Ride out." The riders broke the pasture fence and drove away 12 of his best steers. Nate did not fire after them. When the dust settled, Bertha stared at the torn fence. "They took your winter. They did not take the children. Because I lied. Because you stood where they could hear you." She turned on him. "As long as I remain, they will return." Nate holstered the Colt. "Perhaps. I have to go." The words hurt more when spoken aloud. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached inside his coat and took out a folded map. "This trail stays below the ridge," he said. "It joins the east road 2 miles from the station." Bertha stared at the paper. He set it on the fence post. "I will saddle the roan." "You are helping me leave." "I promised the choice would be yours." Anger rose in her because grief had nowhere else to go. "You could at least argue." His expression tightened. "Do not mistake restraint for lack of wanting, Bertha." The words stopped her. He went to the barn. An hour later, her carpetbag was tied behind the saddle. Nate checked the cinch twice and placed a canteen in her hand. He did not ask her to stay. That mercy felt almost cruel. Winnie stood rigid beside the porch. Percival looked at the ground. Bertha knelt before them. "You have both learned enough this week to plague any teacher in Kansas." Winnie's mouth trembled. "Will Tuesday bring you back?" Bertha could not promise. She kissed the child's hair, rose, and mounted. At the fork east of the cottonwoods she stopped. The station lay beyond the ridge. Safety lay farther still, perhaps in another schoolhouse, another spare room, another place where usefulness could be mistaken for belonging. Behind her, the Hayes homestead stood beneath a thin line of smoke from the burned grass. Sunday's lessons would begin in the yard if the families came. Nate would stand there because he had surrendered cattle wages and pride without ever taking her choice. Bertha looked at the bag behind her saddle. Running had once preserved what remained of her. This time it would abandon what she had begun to build. She turned the roan west. Before sunrise Sunday, Nate sat on the porch with a cold cup of coffee. Bertha saw him rise when she entered the yard, but he did not come running. He waited at the foot of the steps, hope held so tightly in his face that it looked like pain. She dismounted and carried the carpetbag inside. On the kitchen table she opened both buckles. Nate stood in the doorway. Bertha removed 2 McGuffey readers, a box of chalk, her ink-stained teaching apron, and the small bundle of letters from the Valley families. At the bottom lay one spare dress and her husband's ring wrapped in cloth. She slipped the ring into the pocket of the dress, folded it into the cedar chest at the foot of her bed, and shut the lid. Then she kicked the empty bag beneath the table. "I want the school bell moved here," she said. "We will use it for lessons and warnings. Ride to the Millers and the Ramsey place. Tell every family to come armed and come together." Nate's gaze remained on the bag. "Are you staying?" I am standing. A smile broke across his face. Bertha pointed toward the door. Do not make me regret giving an order before breakfast. Yes, ma'am. He turned to go. Nate. He looked back. Beside me, she said, not in front of me. The smile softened. That is where I mean to be. They spent the morning hauling desks from the abandoned schoolhouse and setting them beneath the barn roof. Percival arranged the chairs in a crooked row. That is not straight, Bertha said. Pa says straight lines are for fences. Nate carried in a desk. I said good fences. Your defense weakens, Bertha told him. Marriage to a schoolteacher is already ruining my authority. The word marriage slipped between them. Percival grinned. Bertha turned away before anyone saw her face warm. By noon, 6 wagons rolled into the yard. Men came with rifles. Women came with food blankets, and children whose slates had gathered dust for months. Old Mr. Coyle brought the iron school bell in his wagon and complained the whole way that it weighed more than sin. Bertha climbed onto the porch to address them. Her hands shook so she gripped the bell rope instead. We cannot promise there will be no danger, she said. We can promise no family will face it alone. Lessons begin today. She pulled the rope. The bell rang across the prairie. 2 riders appeared near the cottonwoods. A dozen rifles shifted, not raised but ready. Nate stepped to Bertha's side. He did not speak for her. He did not reach for the rope. He simply stood where she had asked him to stand. The riders watched the gathered families and turned away. No one cheered. The victory was too new and too fragile for that. Mrs. Miller brought her son to the first desk. Then another mother followed. Within minutes, children filled the barn with recited sums, squeaking chalk, and questions asked too loudly. Bertha taught until her voice went hoarse. When the last wagon left, Winnie leaned against her hip. Are you our mother now? The yard quieted. Bertha knelt so they were eye to eye. No one can replace your mother. I would never try. Winnie's face fell. But I would like to stay, Bertha continued. I would like to teach you, scold you, hear your bad dreams, and love you for as long as you will have me. Winnie considered this with grave attention. Then she put both arms around Bertha's neck. Percival looked toward Nate. Is the betrothal still false? Nate removed his hat. Bertha rose slowly. The children need many things, he said, but I will not ask a woman to become one of them. He came no closer until she nodded. I want Bertha Nash, he said. I want the woman who rings bells at armed men, insults my biscuits, and makes a frightened house brave enough to laugh. I want her after the children are grown and after the school no longer needs this barn. I want her when she is useful and when she is tired and when she has nothing to give anyone. Bertha's eyes filled. I will not be a replacement, she said. No. And I will not be kept because the house runs better. No. She stepped down from the porch. Then ask me for myself. Nate held out his hand, palm open. Bertha Nash, will you marry me? She placed her hand in his. Yes, after I earned my first month's teaching wage. His laugh came free this time. He drew her close, then paused, waiting. Bertha closed the remaining distance. Their kiss was brief and gentle, witnessed by 2 children, one offended hen, and Percival's loud complaint that he had known all along. The past gave up its last secret 2 weeks later. Bertha was mending the winter coat Nate had carried from the deserted Emery cabin when he brought Percival home, the coat that had belonged to the boy's missing father, when her needle struck something hard inside the lining. She opened the seam and drew out a folded sheet wrapped in oilskin. The list inside held the names of homesteaders who had refused the so-called levy, followed by dates, acreages, and marks beside those already burned out or driven away. Ramsey, Emery, Nash. At the bottom, newly written, was Hayes. Bertha remembered the unfinished line in Thomas's letter, "If I cannot meet you, trust Elias." "Thomas did not leave the proof with me," she said. "He trusted Elias Emery to hide it." Percival stood beside her, pale but steady. "My pa kept it safe." Nate rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Looks that way." The ledger did not win the valley by itself. The bell had done what paper could not. It had made frightened people stand together. But the list gave their courage a direction. Nate rode with 3 other men to the telegraph office in the neighboring town. Bertha wrote the message herself, naming the false deputy, and every family was prepared to testify. The U.S. Marshal's reply came 4 days later. By the first snow, federal officers entered the valley with warrants. The riders were arrested at Miller's store after discovering that no witnesses would look away for them anymore. Winter closed over Kansas, but not over the school. The families paid Bertha in coins, flour, lamp oil, and one troublesome piglet that Percival named Arithmetic. At the end of the month, Nate placed her wages on the table without counting them for her. Bertha counted anyway. "Enough," he asked, "for a modest wedding." "I had hoped for an immodest supper." "You may have 1 extra pie." "Then I accept the terms." They married on a Tuesday afternoon beneath the school bell. Bertha wore the same dark dress in which she had arrived, but Winnie pinned a yellow ribbon at her throat. Percival stood beside Nate in boots polished beyond recognition. When the circuit judge asked who gave the bride away, Bertha answered before anyone else could. "I give myself." Nate's hand tightened around hers, not to claim it, but to receive what she had freely offered. After the vows, he kissed her forehead first, the same quiet promise he had made when he left the porch steps open. Bertha caught his coat and brought his mouth to hers, before the witnesses could decide the ceremony lacked romance. That afternoon, the eastbound stagecoach slowed beside the schoolhouse. The driver leaned down. "Heading east, Mrs. Hayes." Bertha stood by the fence with her old carpetbag in one hand. Nate waited near the porch. He did not call to her. He had learned that love was not proven by closing the road. She looked at the coach, then at the bag. It held extra slates, chalk, seed packets for spring, and 4 tin cups wrapped in cloth so they would not rattle. "No, thank you," she said. "I am already home." The driver tipped his hat and snapped the reins. Bertha watched the coach roll east until it became a dark speck on the pale road. Then she turned west toward the rise. Winnie was chasing Arithmetic away from the woodpile. Percival carried an armful of kindling. Nate held the gate open and smiled at her as though her return were not a duty he expected, but a gift he would never stop recognizing. Bertha walked through. When the road out of Kansas finally lay open, she let the stagecoach pass, rang the school bell, and chose the 4 bowls waiting on the table.